All right, good morning, everybody. This is Stephanie Kennitzer. I'm the Director of the Community Outreach and Engagement Branch. Sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. I hope that we have a good crowd in here. We will go ahead and get started to honor everybody's time. There's a few notes up on the screen to help you manage today's presentation. We're going to email out the slides that Jonathan Evans is sharing with us. We'll be sending those out shortly to all attendees. If you haven't received them, you can send an email to the one that you see on your screen that says cam@gsa.gov. We've muted everybody so that the audio is going well for everybody. You can hear Jonathan's presentation. If you have questions, please post those in the chat. You'll find that along the lower, there's a Q&A and a chat button along the lower bar on the Zoom screen, so you can post those there, and we'll be responding to those throughout the presentation. And then as Jonathan completes the presentation, we'll open it up to Q&As or anything else that's still outstanding. We do offer CLPs for this particular presentation. We send those out approximately within 2 business days after the presentation. If you don't receive them or have any issues with what you do receive, please again email cam@gsa.gov. And we will be sending out a survey following our event, and we look forward to your feedback and input on how we can continue to improve these type of presentations and other content that you might like to hear about. We do have other webinars coming up, and we'll go ahead and add you to the invite list for those and keep you posted about future activities so you can join those. You can also find most of that on gsa.gov/events and on our Interact community. So with that, I hope Jonathan didn't leave. I see him leaving his chair, so I hope he comes back shortly. There he is. There you go. Good morning. All right. So with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan Evans. Jonathan is the program lead for our civilian services acquisition workshops within the professional services and human capital categories. Jonathan has been underdoing this work for about 3 years. It started as a conversation that happened at an interagency team meeting on the category management side of the house, where we understand DoD was doing this type of work, and it was raised that, hey, maybe we ought to consider doing this for the civilian agencies as well. And Jonathan became the lead for that effort, immersing himself into the acquisition workshop landscape over at DoD, learning what those are all about, what they do, how we go about doing them, the value and the benefit they bring to agencies. And he has since then mastered facilitation techniques and is working on training a cadre of facilitators within GSA and other agencies that can apply these type of workshops to your agencies. He has a lot of great experience in program management. He's worked in various aspects of GSA, from fleet to category management, supply, et cetera, et cetera. I can bore you with all of his credentials, but just so you know, he is an expert in this area. So Jonathan, we look forward to hearing from you about how these workshops are going, why agencies should consider them, and how we can go about making that happen for them.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Stephanie. Glad you guys could attend this morning. I'm going to talk with you about our Civilian Service Acquisition Workshops program that we are launching this year, and also going to talk with you a little bit about some past experiences we had with customer agencies and the workshops that they've been through. So first and foremost, let's take a look at what a service acquisition workshop is. So it is a facilitated workshop. I think that's really important to just get that locked in right away. So this is not a training course. It's not, not meant to be, you sit down and get lectured at. This is a workshop. So it's my job as a facilitator is to sit down and get the team that's there in the workshop working together. So each workshop is built around a specific acquisition and the multifunctional team that's getting it done. So the acquisition teams, some agencies are calling them integrated project teams or requirements development teams. However you look at it, we'll talk about what that team looks like from a workshop standpoint. But over the course of the 5-day workshop, the team gets together and goes through all 8 steps in the performance-based process. And those steps, we'll look at those as well, but it covers everything from forming the team all the way through closeout. So over the course of the workshop, the team is going to develop the mission for their acquisition, the measurable objectives or high-level objectives that they're seeking to achieve with the acquisition, the specific performance requirements that they are looking for, and performance-based strategies for them to accomplish those objectives. And in addition to that, given that it's a 5-day workshop, and that's not a lot of time, we want to provide a roadmap for the team to complete that. So I'm just real quick, I see a hand raised and then I saw it go down. So if you do have a question at any point, I want to encourage you to either put that in the chat or you can drop that in the Q&A. Q&A might work a little better because then we can track which ones we've answered and which ones we haven't. So if you have a question, please feel free to drop that in the Q&A. So we have 5 high-level objectives for the workshop. The first one is to understand and apply the performance-based acquisition process to your acquisition. So whatever that acquisition may be, we want to apply that. And the rationale for that is that the FAR says that performance-based acquisition is the preferred approach for acquiring services. So we actually need to have a rationale and justification for not doing a performance-based acquisition. But even in the process, when we say, yeah, I'm going to do a performance-based acquisition, we recognize that that's not always easy. It can be very difficult to move away from a statement of work and being very prescriptive to the contractor to a more results-oriented approach to what we're trying to buy. So that's what the workshop helps the team do. It helps them get their heads wrapped around those concepts and how to apply them to their acquisition. We're also going to bring in tools, resources, techniques, and innovations that are going to be specifically tailored to the team and what they need. So we do a lot of prep work, and you're going to hear more about that a little bit later. We do a lot of prep work with the agency to identify what the specific needs of the team are. And then we look for the right tools that are going to support the work that they're doing. So if we hear that there's a real strong need to get their communication strategy in place, then we'll bring in some tools related to communications planning, and we might even bring in a subject matter expert to help them with their communications planning. If there's an agile development requirement, so you need to bring in some agile development services, that can be a tricky service to buy. So we have some resources and that we can bring in around not only how to procure agile services, or even providing the team with about a 30-45 minute primer on how agile development works, so that everybody understands the basic concepts. But we also have an IGCE tool for purchasing agile services that's been effective for us in the past. Plus there's a myriad of innovations and strategies and best practices that we're gathering from other agencies, and we're bringing into those workshops. So you'll get exposure to that. And then this third objective is really, this is the foundation of what the workshop is all about. So the objective of the workshop really is to get the team collaborating together through these facilitated activities to accomplish work product. So to get work started, whether that's developing a project charter, whether that's getting a huge list of market research questions and starting to identify how those questions are going to get answered by looking at different market research techniques, whether that's coming up with the performance requirements document to outline all those performance requirements and get them written in really well-crafted requirement statements that are going to be effective not only in getting the results you want to achieve, but also they're going to be easier for our vendors to propose to. So regardless of what the specific focus is, and we do cover all of that, so we will go through all of that, even if the team has maybe done a lot of the initial startup and market research, and maybe they're ready to jump into performance requirements. We'll still cover those earlier sections just to make sure that we've already checked all the boxes and that everything has been done so that we're successfully set up to do that next step, which, performance requirements or source selection evaluation criteria or contract administration. So the team will really be working a lot together. And that's the other aspect of the workshop that's fantastic is so often we have these multifunctional teams which really function more like silos running in parallel. So you've got program office doing their requirements work, and then you've got contracting doing their acquisition work, and they're just kind of working side by side, but there's no real strong team cohesion. And so that's one of the things we really work on throughout the workshop is building that team to be successful. And then ultimately our final two objectives, one to develop that high-level roadmap for successful implementation. That's just as we go through the process, we go, okay, so we've gone through and we've gotten a good start on this step. What's left? What does the team have left to complete? And the team identifies those action items that need to be completed and come up with a high-level timeline for getting that taken care of and identifying a responsible party to ensure that it gets done by that milestone date. So we develop that high-level roadmap, and this last objective is really critical, gaining consensus across the team on the path ahead. So everybody's on the same page. There's not this notion of somebody's bent out of shape because somebody's going a direction they didn't want to go to. The team comes to a consensus on the direction they want to move together, and that's really important. And one of the things that we find is when we bring the teams together and they come to that consensus, it becomes that much easier to take that approach or that strategy back to senior leadership and get support from senior leadership, because the team has done the work to determine that that's the best path, and that's why everybody's come to consensus on it. And so there's rationale and justification that project sponsors or senior leadership can wrap their heads around. So in a nutshell, the primary focus of the Seesaw is to get all members of the acquisition team contributing and working together, and to get work started. Sometimes we get that work completed, and other times we add that to the list of things that need to get done after the workshop. So who should attend these workshops? So there's 3 roles that have to be involved in the workshop. And then there are a number of other roles which we call members of the key members of the team or the core team that need to be at the workshop. And then there's some other roles that might come in and support the team but don't necessarily need to be part of the workshop. So at a minimum, we have to have somebody identified as a project manager. And we will work with the customer agency in advance of the workshop to try and identify who is going to be that individual who's going to be the project manager. And sometimes the PM happens to be the core. Sometimes that PM is somebody else from the program office. But it's really somebody who is going to ensure that not just the acquisition pieces, but all of the project pieces that are also involved, like risk management, communications, and stakeholder management, and stakeholder analysis, and all of these other pieces, market research, that those get done. And ultimately, obviously, the contracting officer still owns, the acquisition plan and the acquisition strategy and signs the contract. And the project manager owns, the requirements documents and the project documents, and the core is going to own all of the contract administration, documentation, and all that. But they're going to come together as a team and start helping each other to get the work done collaboratively. So in addition to those first 3 roles I mentioned, there's, if you have a CO who's being supported by a contract specialist, we want to get that contract specialist in there. We obviously want the core, technical representatives, so SMEs, requirements owners, key users, oversight management personnel if there's a particularly tricky quality aspect that needs to be managed, to any external support that might be involved. And then there's other ancillary roles that might come into play. And a couple of them that really rise to the surface, IT support. So if you're doing a services requirement that's going to involve the development of some sort of IT system that's going to integrate or run in tandem with other IT systems, we would work with the team to identify, okay, who from the agency's IT needs to be involved in this? Is it, does it rise to the level of the enterprise architect, or is an information system security manager or ISSO or a product owner? Whatever that level is, we want to ensure that IT is there to ensure that whatever acquisition strategy the team comes up with and whatever risks are documented and whatever stakeholders are identified, that the IT aspects are appropriately captured. And the other one is budget and finance. And this really comes into play with respect to incentives, performance incentives, and looking at how best to budget for those if those are going to be considered and incorporated. Obviously, small business would be appropriate, very appropriate to involve if you're looking to expand your small business competition with the solution. And then I always say, legal counsel should always be there and will always be there for your acquisition. However, legal is one of those groups where, if you involve them at too early of a stage, things can get a little bit convoluted because they tend to think in a very black and white. If you're brainstorming ideas, they're likely to look at absolutely every single one of those ideas as if it's concrete. So as far as legal is concerned, they're an invaluable resource that should be involved, but really at that point at which the team has come to a consensus on some of the directions that they want to move. But they are a good kind of optional outside team member to refer to and have involved. So let's look at the steps that the team goes through in this 5-day workshop. There's 8 of them. I'm not going to read you all of this stuff on the slide, and of course you'll have this as a takeaway. But we do cover each of these 8 steps, and you can see the purpose of each step and why the step is there. But if you look at the bottom area where it says potential outputs for each step, you can see some of the actual work products that the team will be engaged in developing and completing throughout the workshop. One of the things that we really like to do with teams that are early enough in the process, that is, they're really just starting to engage in their acquisition planning and their requirements development, is to help the team draft a project charter. Because we find that the project charter really helps to frame out, what are we trying to do? What's the objective of this acquisition? Why, what's the why of it all? Why and why now? How does this tie into our agency's strategic plan, our agency's strategic goals, initiatives, so that the team really understands the connection of the acquisition to the agency's ultimate goals and outputs. Beyond that, we really start to dig into the requirement itself and what the high-level objectives are. So asking the team to think about, 5 years, 3 years, however long the contract is anticipated to be, what do you want it to look like? What do you want things to look like? What do you want to have achieved? Not necessarily just to say, hey, we want to have been supported that whole time, but what actual outcomes does the team want to achieve? So if it's a communication support contract, in 5 years, what do you want as an organization? What do you want your communication to look like? Do you want to be communicating more effectively with customers and with industry and internally? Do you want to have more consistent messaging and branding? And so looking at those high-level objectives related to communications, this is just an example, and trying to identify what those primary objectives are, that really helps to shape not only the market research and what we're investigating in terms of what we need to do to get those and who can provide that support, but also that helps us to start looking at how we craft our performance requirements. So those performance requirements are those specific, you can call them tasks or what have you, but they have a specific performance standard. So, achieving, providing X service in this context to achieve this result, and we want to do that to this standard. And so that's how we start to move to that performance-based acquisition, as opposed to just having, deliverables. Deliver a weekly report. Okay, well, what result have we achieved with delivering a weekly report? So really thinking about the purpose behind each task. What do we want the result of that work to be? And of course, that leads into developing draft work statement, and identifying the performance standards and possible incentives, and also eventually looking at what sort of quality assurance surveillance we're going to use to monitor the performance and ensure that the standards are being met. And so looking at who's going to do the monitoring, what type of monitoring, what's the frequency of that, how is it going to be documented. All of that gets explored in the workshop. So even though the team may not be in a position to fully draft out the quality assurance surveillance plan, the workshop helps the team get started with each of these, so that they have a good foundation upon which to do the work moving forward. And what we find is, by providing this foundation, by bringing the whole team together and having them work together on all of these steps, we find that there's an acceleration in performance. So a lot of times what we see in our normal work environments without the workshop is there's so much back and forth between program and contracting, and then other priorities come up and things shift, and people move, and so our lead times in pre-award are very long. It takes us a long time, and some agencies have a 2-year cycle. So if you want to award an acquisition in 2023, you've got to start that process now. And what we think is that's too long. And we also think that if you can get the team starting to work together and establishing a rhythm of working together, and a plan to continue to work together, that you can reduce that lead time significantly. So that's kind of one of the objectives that we're trying to work towards. But by the end of the 5 days, the team will have covered all 8 steps, and they will have started some work products in some of the steps, and they will have a clear roadmap for those, like steps 7 and 8. You're not going to have much to do in the world of managing performance, because you won't be at that point. And of course, contract closeout is miles down the road as far as we think today. But what thinking about in terms of setting ourselves up for success. So thinking about how are we documenting lessons learned along the way? How are we sharing documentation related to this project? So talking about how the team is going to work together to set themselves up for success, so by the time they get to close out, they've got all of the things they need at their fingertips to be able to do that closeout quickly, efficiently, effectively. All right. So before I move on.
Hey, Jonathan, there's a couple of questions.
Yeah.
It might be a good time before you jump in to address some of those. Can you see them?
I can, thanks.
Okay.
So, hey, John, good to see you again. So as part of the 5-day process, the objective to develop an actionable purchase requisition for budget to fund and OCPO to procure, or a roadmap to get to that point. So it depends is the best answer to that question. So if when I, as the senior facilitator, meet with the customer agency and start doing that prep work, one of the questions I'm asking is, why are we doing this workshop? What are the outputs that you want to achieve? And I ask that question of at least 2 people, if not 3 people. And those 2 to 3 people are the project sponsor. So I will work with you, whether you're a CO or a PM. I'll work with you to say, okay, who is the project sponsor here? Is it the program director that's overseeing this program? Are they the sponsor? Is it somebody in your office of senior procurement executive? Is it somebody in your head of your acquisition shop? whoever that person is, I'll meet with them and have a sponsor interview and ask them, what do they see as the primary takeaway from the week? What do they want the team to have achieved? And we hear an array of different areas of focus. But if we were to hear, hey, we really want an actionable requirements package that the team can then, start building their acquisition around, and we could secure funding to move this forward, then we would place some serious emphasis on that. And again, the goal is not necessarily to get to final documents status, but we want to at least get the ball much closer to the finish line on that. So that's the same, if you're talking about your acquisition strategy or your ACT plan or your quality assurance surveillance plan, whatever the emphasis that the organization has, we want to move the ball forward. If we can get to the finish line, fantastic, and get a final draft in place, that would be ideal. But it's not always practical in 5 days. The other two people I asked that question of are the project manager and the CO. And oftentimes those two individuals have different emphases that they're trying to get achieved. And so we want to make sure that our workshop, again, it's tailored to the acquisition team. So we want to make sure that it's appropriately tailored to what their objectives are. So then the other questions come in. Is there a contract in a civilian agency that has done this CSOD to discuss, is there a contact in a civilian agency that has done this CSOD to discuss their experiences? Yeah, and I'm going to actually talk about an experience of a recent effort that we did for Department of Transportation here in just a second. So I can share a contact there at Department of Transportation. We also did one at Office of Personnel Management last year as part of our kind of prototyping phase of implementation. And so I've got a couple of contacts that I can put you in touch with, but they've had great success. So the other question that's come in, and then we'll get back to the presentation, is there a price for this service, this assistance? So for these workshops, service acquisition workshops, is there a price? No, that's one of the great things about it right now. There is no fee for this service, at least through FY21. And how far ahead before the planned execution should the agency request assistance? So what I would say is the sooner you can request assistance, the better. So if you have a requirement that you think would be a good fit for the workshop, reach out as soon as you can, and we'll get you information on the intake form and how to start that process with us. That being said, our bandwidth it's not infinite. So we're working to accommodate and deliver as many of these workshops as we can. But we're going to be limited by weeks in the year and also available resources to staff them. So let's take a look at what it looks like for you as a participating agency if you decide, hey, we want to request one of these workshops. Well, what does that look like? So in terms of commitment, again, looking for an executive sponsor within the agency, and also someone to step up and be the project manager, or at least getting an agency point of contact that I can work with as a facilitator to help coordinate logistics, ensure that we get the team organized and get it on everybody's calendar and get all that set up. Again, as a facilitator, part of my planning work is to work with the agency to get that leadership support established. In terms of resources, there's an asterisk next to this first one, and that's because we do have some agencies that we have been partnering with to develop a network of co-facilitators. These workshops are very intensive. There's a lot of work. And so it's very useful and very beneficial to have two facilitators run the workshop. And so we are actually, we have a multi-agency cohort of people who have been helping us along the way to develop this civilian service acquisition workshop program. And some of those individuals have said, hey, I want to be involved as a facilitator, and have gone through a little bit of acquisition training and a lot of it of facilitation training, which is really the key competency for our facilitators. And one thing that we are working on this year, in this fiscal year, is to establish a formal certification process for individuals who are interested in becoming partner agency co-facilitators for our CSAWs. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me. We'd love to talk with you and work with you. The other resource is really looking at the platform. So traditionally, we would offer these workshops in person, but we made a shift, obviously, with the the pandemic that spread across the globe. So we have shifted our approach to virtual facilitation, which has posed some unique challenges in terms of identifying the technology that's going to support our facilitation work. So some agencies have access to some technologies and not to others, and vice versa. So our preferred platform for delivering the CSAW is ZoomGov, and we have access to that and the ability to set up those ZoomGov sessions. We also have access to WebEx, which is kind of for me as a facilitator, having explored both platforms, that's kind of a backup for me. It's not my preferred platform to facilitate on. But if your agency has any restrictions against Zoom and that we can't get past, then we can move to WebEx. And really, kind of the third alternative is really looking at what platforms your agency uses. So a lot of agencies have moved to Microsoft Teams and are using Teams as their primary virtual conferencing platform. And we being GSA have some ability to attend and participate in those Microsoft Teams conferences, but our ability to really be involved as a host and to take advantage of the full virtual conferencing features isn't there. So that's a challenge to us. So that being said, that's just one of the logistical pieces that we work through, right? So wherever your agency is at, whatever technology you're using, we're going to work to make sure that we find the right approach that's going to make the workshop doable. And then the other two commitment things, really the last one for the agency is participants, and that's identifying all of the right key team members that need to be involved in the workshop, ensuring that they are all available and do in fact attend the workshop. And because we are using a virtual platform, and because we're using every last feature of the virtual platform, that includes breakout rooms and various share screen, team collaboration, facilitated activities, things through that platform. We have a 30-minute pre-workshop that we ask everybody to attend, just to orient them to the technology, to make sure that everybody is comfortable and ready to go on day one of the workshop. The workshop is approximately 40 hours. Really, it's probably more like 4.5 days. We try and not drag things out too long on the last day of the workshop. But it is scheduled initially as a 40-hour workshop, Monday through Friday. And this has small amount of post work, and I would say that's probably misleading, because after the workshop, the team still needs to get done the work that they need to get done. But just in terms of workshop follow-up, and like filling out the workshop post-workshop survey, and following up, we'll follow up with you several months after the workshop to kind of gauge how effective the workshop has been. So that's really what we're referring to here. But of course, there is the unspoken commitment of, hey, you guys still have to get this acquisition done. So whatever work is left to do, the team has got the plan to figure out how to do it. The last commitment is really from my end, from our end as the facilitators, which is that our facilitators have the appropriate training, as I mentioned earlier, that we work with the agency to tailor the workshop content so that we've structured it just so that it's going to meet the team's objectives and needs. And then, all of the pre-workshop actions that we take, including interviewing the sponsors and the project manager and the CEO, doing all of the prep work on just logistics for the technology, all of that stuff. So one thing I will say is, it's never too early to put in a request to get your workshop going, but I will say that it can occasionally be too late. So ideally, we would like to have at least 30 days of lead time in order to effectively plan and prepare for the workshop. We're attempting right now to do a workshop for another agency on a much shorter schedule, but that's going to be a real challenge and a real big lift. So at least 30 days ahead of the workshop is when you'd want to have your intake form to us, and so we can start that process. And then, of course, we do commit to being a resource and supporting the team even beyond the workshop. And we kind of discuss what that looks like with each team, and it kind of depends on each team's needs. So here's another way of looking at things here in terms of how this all shakes out, planning and pre-work. You identify your requirement. You submit an intake form, giving as much information as you have. So, one of the things we have on the intake form is a checklist that just says, what have you done so far? Have you created a project charter? Have you done market research? Do you have a requirements document? Just trying to see what work you've already done as a team, and that part of that helps us shape what to focus on in the workshop. Then we need to get the participants, so we need to figure out who all needs to be there, who's on the team. We conduct those sponsor interviews to identify what we call our facilitation Ps: purpose, product, participants, probable issues, process, and place, or platform in this case. And so we work with whoever the agency point of contact is to schedule those interviews and get that taken care of. Then as facilitators, we tailor the workshop content, and we have a kind of a foundational base workshop structure that we use, but then we tailor it to meet the team's needs. And then the pre-work is getting participants familiarized with the technology. And to do that, as I said, we have that 30-minute session, plus we also have a virtual participant manual. So there's some guidance in there on how to navigate the technology. So this is not a hard and fast, this is what it looks like every time. But more or less, this is kind of what the workshop week looks like. Again, Monday through Friday. Monday we cover steps 1 and 2, step 3 on Tuesday, steps 4 and 5 on Wednesday, 5 and 6 on Thursday, and then Friday is really kind of real quick through 7 and 8. And then what we really like to do on Friday is invite the executive sponsor from the agency to come and then have the team present to the executive sponsor all of the work that they've done over the course of the week. And it makes for a nice wrap up both for the team and for the executive sponsor to see the outputs of the week. So as you can see, we are going through those 8 steps in the process over the course of the week. And I say that this is not hard and fast because, as I said before, each workshop is tailored to the needs of the specific team. So if we need to spend, if we need to consolidate steps 1, 2, and 3 on day 1 and then spend, day 2 and 3 on step 4 and then do 5, 6, 7, and 8, on Thursday, that might be how we do it. So it just depends on our areas of focus for the workshop. So this is kind of another way of looking at that 8-step slide I showed you earlier. just kind of shows you the roadmap that we go on, establishing the team, identifying objectives, market research, work statement development, defining measurements, managing performance. So you can see at each step in the process what the teams do. So this is actually the roadmap that was taken from a recent workshop we did with Department of Transportation. And so these are the actions that they accomplished at each step in the process. So just a few examples here. Step 4 began, so they did a big brainstorm on potential requirements, but then took that big dump of brainstormed ideas and started refining them into quality requirement statements. Step 5, they started developing performance standards for each one of those requirements. Then, looking ahead, source selection. We had a presentation from a member of the Acquisition Innovation Advocates Council do a presentation on innovative source selection techniques, which was fantastic. So that's something that we can bring in for your workshop if that's of interest. So there's so many different ways that these workshops can shake out, but the team is going to be doing a lot of work over the course of the 5 days, which is great. That's what the workshops are designed to do, is to really get the team producing work in an environment that's structured and really helps them to do it in a way that doesn't create that bogged down, overwhelmed feeling. So this is just a fun little graphic to kind of show you, as a facilitator, this is kind of what it looks like on our end, what we're doing here to make this effective. You can see we've got our lighting set up to be effective, and so you can see us really well. We have a clock. We really manage the time to the minute as best we can. And of course, we have lots of different documentation that we use to support each facilitated exercise that we do. And then, little cheat sheets for our facilitation. Lots of caffeine, especially for me, because I'm on the West Coast, and I imagine that many, if not most of you, are on the East Coast or Central Time. And so we do tend to start the workshop pretty early for me, but around 9:30 Eastern Time. Of course, if you have a team that's on the West Coast, man, reach out to me. I would love to do a 9:30 start time West Coast. That would be, that'd be fun. I wouldn't have to get up so early in the morning. So this is kind of what it looks like from a participant standpoint. We help teams get it set up so that they can see the whole team. So it really does feel like an interactive, collaborative experience as a team. And then, of course, they can see, whatever the current document that they're working on. In this example, they're working on stakeholder analysis. So this is kind of what it looks like from a participant standpoint. Probably not too dissimilar from what you're seeing here on this session. And then this slide just the next 2 slides kind of give you an example. And these 2 slides are not included in the deck that's going to be sent out. And that's because some of the information in here is specific to Department of Transportation and the work that they were doing. But you can see that we did facilitated exercises that gathered personal objectives. We did an activity related to analyzing the current approach. So what's working well with our current approach? What could we be doing better? We did some work in stakeholder identification, market research experience, market research questions. A couple slides later, the technical risks. We did a big brainstorm on requirements, just kind of getting those, as many different requirements as we could out with the intent of refining those later. Looking at potential evaluation factors and doing a voting approach to kind of identify which technical evaluation factors would be most appropriate. And then again, you can see there's a little snapshot there from some myth busting on market research, and then some more voting there on different proposal approaches or ways that we could request proposals or evaluate proposals. So here's another shot, just kind of shows some of the documents that the team developed, the requirements roadmap worksheet, the stakeholder identification and high-level communications plan, the risk register with risk mitigation strategies, and again, our high-level roadmap to accomplish the requirement. So it was asked earlier, can we have a point of contact at the agency to hear how it went for them? I can certainly do that for you, but here's the feedback we heard from the participants at our recent Department of Transportation session. So they said, yeah, we accomplished that purpose that we set out to accomplish, and we accomplished all 5 of the workshop objectives. The workshop was conducted early enough to be helpful. It accelerated their team performance. The facilitators encouraged participation and helped reach consensus. And if you read some of these verbatims here at the bottom, I like this third one. What I like best was the flow of instruction and how one aspect builds upon the other. I also appreciate having facilitators so the group maintains focus and avoids going off in tangents. So, the workshop is very effective. Teams really do come together, and if you're familiar with the forming, storming, norming, performing model of team formation, one of my jobs as a facilitator is to actually get the team quickly through forming and storming and set up the structured process in such a way where the norms are already there. So the team actually doesn't storm as long or as hard, but actually starts norming quickly. And what happens is we see accelerated team performance. And that's one of the great benefits of facilitation that the workshop really helps. So looking at some other benefits, what happens in a seesaw, and then what does that result in? Well, we bring the right team together, and because of that, we believe that this is something that results in reduced lead times. We know anecdotally that it does. We don't have specific data to support that yet, but we're just getting this off the ground and running, so we hope to have support for that with data moving forward. But we do have support that it does result in better team dynamics. And of course, also greater participation, accelerated team performance, and also this clarity of purpose. Everybody on the team really understands what we're trying to get done. Oftentimes what I find is program office has a very clear vision of what they want to get, and contracting has a very clear vision of how to get whatever they are supposed to help program get. But oftentimes program offices don't fully understand the how. How does contracting work? How does all the regulations play in? How does their acquisition planning process and their review boards and their source selection? A lot of that isn't necessarily familiar to all people in program offices. And likewise on the contracting side, what we hear a lot is, yeah, I kind of know what program wants, but if I start reading through these, performance requirements or these, their task statements, I don't really know it. I don't know their field of work, so I don't really know what they're trying to buy. So one of the benefits of having everybody come together is that there is that shared clarity of purpose among all members. Program understands contracting, contracting understands program needs. The other thing that we see as a result of these workshops is there's better overall project management. And that's a result of the fact that we're not just focusing on the acquisition, but we're focusing on the entire life cycle from forming the team all the way through closeout. And that includes all of those project management related documents like risk management, stakeholder management, communications management, all of that. Better performance outcomes. From these workshops, we are emphasizing performance-based acquisition. We know from the history of performance-based acquisition that moving from non-performance-based to performance-based does result in better performance outcomes. So again, we're pretty new in this process, so we don't have the data yet to say for sure that these workshops do result in better performance outcomes, but we do know that if teams do better performance-based acquisitions, inevitably we're looking at better performance outcomes. So we're very confident in that. And again, I've said this several times, but I'll say it again. This does result in a high-level roadmap for the team working together, even after the workshop, and it results in increased buy-in both from the team and from the requiring offices that they represent into the final solution. So everybody really has much stronger buy-in because of the consensus that the team arrives at during the workshop. So here's a few other benefits. If you're not sold on the concept yet, even though it is not a training, it's not a class, it's not a course, it's a workshop, you will be working. But we figure, hey, you're working so hard. In fact, you're working harder in this workshop than you'd be working in a training, and you're going to learn a lot in the process. Let's get you some CLPs. So it is 40 CLPs to each participant. We do promote category management principles, acquisition innovations, and market research tools. This does check a lot of boxes with respect to cross-agency priority goals, as well as category management goals. And given that we're able to do this virtually now, there's a huge reduction in administrative costs. There's no travel involved. We just have to get this on people's calendars and get them to attend. Because right now, we are offering these at no cost. And excuse me, we don't have a plan to implement a fee anytime in the near future. And we may never implement a fee, but that could change. The environments change, but for right now in FY21, we are offering these workshops at no cost. So this is a great chance for your agency to get involved, take advantage of this fantastic workshop model and the facilitation that comes with it without incurring any costs. So you're likely to see a ton of benefits without making a financial investment. I mean, how does it get any better than that, right? So with that, I will end my presentation here and see if there's any questions out there. And I think I've seen
there are a few. I've been responding to some as they come in, Jonathan.
Okay.
And then there's a few that are coming in here now towards the end. So I'll let you just address the ones that are coming in right now.
Okay. So it says here, how do you encourage participants to utilize their cameras for a more interactive participation feel? Have these efforts been successful? Yes. So one of the things that we do is we establish ground rules for the team so that everybody's on the same page, and we communicate some of these expectations in advance. Obviously, we can't make people get on camera, and they each individual is entitled to not get on camera, but there is a certain team dynamic that starts to form, and what we've noticed is that most people start to realize the value of being on camera because their teammates are also on camera, and so it creates a more interactive and dynamic experience. It has been successful. I think the biggest challenge that we've had is helping just a small handful of people navigate their own technology limitations, whether that's bandwidth issues or their camera, or trying to get a virtual background like you see behind me here applied because they don't want to show their house. But all of that is some of the work that we do in that half-hour pre-session that we do before the workshop. And of course, we continue to do some of that work throughout the workshop itself if participants are having some issues. Is this limited to GSA employees? I'm not entirely sure what the question is here. If you're referring to the workshops as a whole, no, the workshops, we are offering these to all government agencies for their service acquisition needs. I will say that the workshop really is probably most appropriate for acquisitions that are at least $10 million anticipated total life cycle value. But that being said, even if it's less than 10 million, if it's a particularly complex effort, it may still be a good fit. So I don't want to deter anyone. If you have a requirement you think would be a good fit, just send us an intake form, which we'll make sure we get sent out with the presentation. Send us an intake form, and we'll talk it over with you. And if it's not a good fit, we'll let you know that. If your question is about facilitators, no, even that's not limited to GSA employees either. So we are working to develop some Seesaw facilitators within GSA, but we are also equally working to develop a multi-agency network of Seesaw facilitators. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to me on that front, and we can get you working on that. So how can we register for upcoming Seesaw training sessions? Well, this is the only Seesaw training session I have on the books right now. But if you if you'd like me to come and do I have a much shorter overview session that I can do, particularly if you want to have me come in and brief some folks in your organization. I can give a much abbreviated version of this and just brief your agency on the Seesaw program and how it works. That being said, if you're talking about registering for a Seesaw workshop, so you actually want to have a workshop done for an acquisition in your organization, what you need to do is send us an intake form. All right. And I think that's all the questions, unless anybody else has got any questions that they still want to ask.
Yeah, that looks like all the questions. And like I said, I answered a few of them as we were going, Jonathan. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, with that, I suppose we will wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Jonathan, for the excellent presentation. You've got it down. You've been doing these for a while now, and there's a lot of great information being shared here. We do encourage agencies to consider a Seesaw. We will send out a link to the intake form to everybody who participated today, as well as the slide deck, and you will be receiving a CLP. So all of that should come into your inbox. If you don't receive that in a reasonable amount of time, give us a day or two. Email to cam@gsa.gov, and we'll get that. We'll follow up with you. We do these quarterly spotlight webinars. Spotlight webinars are really under our category management umbrella, so the design of them is to improve how we do acquisition across the federal government, especially in the professional services arena. We are doing our next spotlight webinar in February 9th. I don't expect you to remember that date, but we will send you some reminders about them. And the focus will be on the Small Business Mentor Protege program and how that works and how agencies can take advantage of that, any insights or new changes that are coming in that program. So we look forward to that conversation in February. Hard to believe we're talking about February, but it'll be right around the corner. Craziness in this world. So thanks again, Jonathan, for all your insight and information and wisdom on hosting Seesaws. I'm sure you are going to get some takers after this webinar.
It was my pleasure. And for those of you who may be interested, if you want to reach out to me, jonathan.evans@gsa.gov. I'll make sure, Stephanie, I'm going to send you an updated slide deck just so it has my contact info in there. And I'll send you the intake form.
Got it. We'll get that out to everybody. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you next time. Have a great Veterans Day, and thank you for those veterans that